Welcome, fellow thrill seekers, to our eerie corner of the internet where the unimaginable comes to life. Are you ready to be transported to a world of darkness and fear? And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. What's the scariest place you've ever been to, and why? Write the comment. Stop killing yourself, Lucy. I was 10 years old when Lucy Rogers took her own life at the age of 13. She slit her wrists in the bathtub and her mother had to break down the door to get to her. She was an only child. Lucy may have done that to herself, but my older sister Sarah and two of her friends helped drive her to it. Sarah had gone to school with Lucy since they were both 5. My parents had told me that Lucy was slow. She didn't understand that a little teasing was all in good fun. My parents had an extreme dislike for people with little to no means, and Lucy's mom was no exception. It was their view that you made your own way in this world, and if your life didn't work out, you had no one to blame but yourself. They made their bed, now they get to lie in it. I guess that attitude transferred over to my sister. If Lucy hadn't been slow, I have a feeling she still would have been picked on because she was dirt poor. I remember Lucy coming to school on Halloween one year, and her costume was a rectangular laundry basket that she wore on her head. She told everyone she was an alien. That was a bad day for her. When she was in kindergarten, Lucy had lost her father in a car crash that was apparently his fault. Everything she and her mother had was gone because of what he had done, and they moved into the worst block of apartments in town. Lucy's mother worked all the time to try and pull herself out of the hole that her husband had left her in. Although she worked all the time, Lucy was the center of her universe. Lucy loved her mother. For as much shit as she got at school, she got just as much sugar at home. Unfortunately, no amount of sugar takes away all the shit, and one caring voice is always lost in the middle of a cacophony of torment. 3 days after Lucy was put in the ground, my sister and her friends had a sleepover at our house. They camped out in the backyard. It was nice outside, so all the windows in the house were open. I could hear them laughing about Lucy from my bedroom. If I was hearing them, my parents must have heard them, but they said nothing. It made me sick to my stomach. It was Friday the 13th, and they all had the idea of trying to contact Lucy from beyond the grave. They wanted to ask her if she was happy, now that she was wherever suicides ended up. Angela Carey had brought a Ouija board, and Cece Lawrence had raided her mother's stash of Bath and Body Works candles and filled a duffel bag with them. They set up a card table in our backyard, and as soon as it got dark, they lit all the candles. Within a few minutes, our backyard smelled like lemongrass and chocolate chip cookies. They put 4 chairs around the card table. My sister brought out a few things from our basement, and I watched the 3 of them from my window on the 2nd floor. I watched them make a life-sized dummy. They used an old ratty nightgown from my mother and some newspapers for stuffing the body. My sister placed a laceless pair of work boots under the nightgown to look like feet and a pair of black leather driving gloves for her hands. They used a paper grocery bag topped with some red yarn for hair as a head. Finally, my sister had copied off a picture of Lucy's face onto a sheet of paper and taped it to the bag. Lucy was smiling. They started a seance. I watched them from my bedroom window. They joined hands and fiddled with the Ouija board and asked Lucy's spirit to come into the dummy. They acted as if the whole thing had worked, and then they began to taunt the dummy. It was disgusting. Stop killing yourself, Lucy. Stop killing yourself, Lucy. They made the dummy motion as if it was slitting its own wrists. Do you guys think she went to hell? Anybody can go to hell. You're so bad. It went on and on. They held hands again and asked Lucy to say something. They were quiet for a moment, and then again, they asked her to say something. There was nothing. Come on, you moron, say something. The doorbell rang. The girls heard it from outside, and I watched them slowly get to their feet. Their mouths hung open and their eyes were full of fear. I walked downstairs to the front room, and Lucy's mother was talking to my parents, asking them for my sister to apologize. She was drunk. My parents were as kind as people like them knew how to be. Lizzie, I think you need to go and sleep it off. No, please. I'm giving them a chance, don't you see? What? They know what they did, and I'm giving them a chance to own up to it. I'm giving them a chance to apologize. My daughter has nothing to apologize for. There was venom in my mother's voice. You saw what they did, didn't you? Everyone knows exactly what they did to her. They've done it for years. I think you're drunk and you need to get off of our porch right now, or we're calling the police. As my father shut the door in the crying woman's face, my mother told her to go get hammered somewhere else. My sister and her friends had seen some of it, and after Lucy's mom left, they ran to the window and stared after her while they smiled. My parents asked them to quit staring and go back outside. They didn't listen. They just stared as the sobbing woman wobbled down the street. We conjured the wrong bitch, ladies, my sister said. All her friends laughed, and I watched them get up and go back outside, whispering to each other the whole way. I heard my parents later that night complaining about how Lucy's mother had no one to blame but her own daughter. I heard them say that a woman who drank like that was probably just going to raise another drunk anyway. It's a hard thing for a 10-year-old girl, knowing your family are horrible people. Before I went to bed, I looked back out of my window. My sister and her friends were in sleeping bags positioned around my parents' fire pit. The fire was burning bright, and I could see their smiles as they laughed and joked. Just a few feet away from them was the card table and 4 chairs. All the candles were still burning. The dummy was still sitting there, facing toward the fire pit. They kept me up for a while with all of their chattering until I finally fell asleep in spite of it. In the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of a thump and then another. I got up to pee, and when I walked back into my room, I took a look out of my window. The fire was almost gone, but the candles were still burning. The 3 girls were still lying around the fire, finally silent. I laid back down and closed my eyes. The wind had picked up outside, and it was bringing the smell of the dying fire into my room along with the smell of chocolate chip cookies and something else, something rotten. There was also a sound being carried on the wind. The sound of scratching. I tilted my head on my pillow and listened. Something was scratching on the side of our house. I thought that maybe a bird was out there, or maybe a cat was stretching itself upward, raking its claws along the siding, but then the sound got closer and closer. It sounded like it was right outside of my window. There was another sound that accompanied the scratching. It sounded like labored breathing. I was scared. I slowly lowered myself over the side of my bed and crawled underneath it. I couldn't see my window from under the bed, only the wall just beneath it. The horrible breathing got louder until it sounded like it was about to come into my room. And then there was silence. I pushed my lips together and stared at the wall just underneath my window. For a moment, there was nothing. I had thought about waking up my parents and telling them I was having a bad dream, but then I noticed a shadow on the floor. Something was looking into my room from outside. I held my breath, even though I wanted to scream. I watched the shadow move back and forth on the floor until it finally disappeared. I waited for just a moment, and then I quietly moved out from underneath my bed. I was going to go to my parents' room. I heard a thump and 2 of my pictures fell from a shelf on my wall, and before I could take another step, there was another thump. It sounded like someone dropping a large rock into a bucket of jello. The whole shelf fell off the wall, and it made a loud crash against the floor. I ran out into the hall and into my parents' room, which was right next to mine. I froze in their doorway, and I saw it standing there over my mother, the dummy that my sister and her friends had made. The bag with the picture of Lucy turned toward me. Lucy's eyes had been poked out, but she was still smiling. It stared at me for a moment, and then it started shuffling around my parents' bed toward me, its laceless work boots leaving muddy prints on my mother's perfect white carpet. It was dragging a bloody sledgehammer along the floor behind it. My mother's old nightgown was spattered and streaked with red and black. Both of my parents' faces were pulp and their bodies were twitching. My mother gurgled. I screamed and ran back into my room and locked the door. I picked up my phone and dialed 911. There was a loud crash against my door, and then I heard a cracking voice. "Stop killing yourself, Lucy." Another loud crash, and the head of the sledgehammer busted through my door. As the dummy tried to pull it back out, blood trickled off of the sledgehammer and spattered down on the carpet. "Stop killing yourself, Lucy." I ran to my window and lowered myself down outside from the windowsill while I heard the door finally give way with one more hit. I could hear the ragged breathing getting closer. I took a breath and let go, and I hit the lawn and heard something pop in one of my ankles. I got to my feet and looked up. The dummy was looking down at me, and then it began to lower itself out of the window. I started screaming and limped my way to the side gate. As I went by, I could see in the fading light of the fire that my sister and all of her friends were in their sleeping bags with their faces caved in. I ran as fast as my ankle would let me. I hope you liked previous story. If you're ready to explore the eerie and unsettling history of schools and the stories that surround them, then buckle up and get ready for a journey you won't soon forget. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss a release. Let's dive into the 5 scariest school legends. Number 5. The Ghostly Janitor. Legend has it that a janitor who died tragically in a school accident still haunts the halls, causing all sorts of mischief. From strange sounds in the middle of the night to unexplained messes, this ghostly janitor is sure to give you goosebumps. The ghostly janitor has been the subject of many spooky stories told by students and staff members alike. Some say that he can be heard whistling his favorite tune as he goes about his business, while others claim to have seen him walking down the empty hallways with a mop and bucket in hand. But it's not just his presence that scares people, it's the mischievous pranks he plays on unsuspecting students and teachers. Doors slamming shut on their own, lockers mysteriously opening and closing, and objects moving around by themselves are all attributed to the ghostly janitor. There are even rumors that he likes to leave cryptic messages on the chalkboard, warning students to stay away from certain parts of the school or to be careful on the stairs. Some say that these messages have saved lives, while others dismiss them as mere coincidence. Despite the spooky reputation of the ghostly janitor, some students have claimed to have had friendly encounters with him. One student even reported that he helped her find a lost textbook that had been missing for weeks, leading her right to it in an unlikely hiding spot. But most people prefer to avoid the ghostly janitor at all costs, knowing that he can be unpredictable and mischievous at the best of times. And so, the legend of the ghostly janitor lives on, haunting the halls of the school and keeping students on their toes. Number 4. The Haunted Locker. One student claims that their locker was haunted by a vengeful ghost who would slam the door shut every time they opened it. Even after switching lockers, the students still heard strange noises coming from the old locker at night. The haunted locker is a well-known story among students, who warn each other to be careful when using certain lockers in the school. According to the legend, the locker was once owned by a student who died tragically in a freak accident. The vengeful spirit of the student then possessed the locker, causing it to slam shut on anyone who dared to open it. The student who claimed to have owned the locker reported that they could hear strange whispers and eerie laughter coming from the locker at night. They also said that they felt a cold draft every time they walked past it, even after they switched to a different locker. Despite the school's best efforts to fix the locker, the haunting continued. The door would still slam shut on its own, and students who used the locker reported feeling a chill run down their spine whenever they opened it. Some even claimed to see the ghostly figure of the deceased student lurking in the shadows nearby. As the story spread, more and more students became afraid to use the locker, even if they were assigned to it by the school. Some began to leave offerings of flowers and candy, hoping to appease the vengeful spirit and prevent it from causing more harm. Today, the locker is still there, a silent reminder of the haunting that once occurred. While some students still avoid it at all costs, others have tried to confront the ghostly presence and put an end to its mischief once and for all. But whether the locker is truly haunted or not remains a mystery, and the legend lives on, chilling new generations of students who dare to open its door. Number 3. The Vanishing Teacher. In the middle of class, one teacher simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind a stack of papers and a confused class. No one knows where she went or if she ever came back, but some say they can still hear her voice in the empty classroom. In the middle of class, one teacher simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind a stack of papers and a confused class. No one knows where she went or if she ever came back, but some say they can still hear her voice in the empty classroom. The teacher in question was known to be a little eccentric, but no one expected her to simply vanish into thin air. One moment she was teaching a lesson, and the next, she was gone. The students in the class were left stunned, unsure of what to do next. When the school administration was notified of the teacher's disappearance, they launched a search for her. They scoured the school grounds, interviewed students and staff members, and even called in outside help, but no one could find any trace of the missing teacher. The classroom where the teacher had been teaching at the time of her disappearance was sealed off, and students were no longer allowed to use it. But rumors began to spread that the teacher's ghost still haunted the room, and that her voice could be heard faintly in the silence. Over time, the story of the vanishing teacher became one of the school's most popular legends. Some students claimed that they had seen her ghostly figure wandering the halls, while others reported hearing her voice when no one else was around. But the truth behind the teacher's disappearance remains a mystery to this day. Some believe that she simply walked out of the school and disappeared into the world, while others think that something more sinister may have happened. Whatever the case may be, the story of the vanishing teacher continues to captivate and intrigue students and staff alike, and the classroom where she disappeared remains a place of mystery and speculation. Number 2. The Possessed Piano. A music teacher once claimed that their piano was possessed by a malevolent spirit that would play eerie melodies in the middle of the night. Some students even reported seeing the piano keys moving by themselves when no one was around. One of the school's music teachers had reported strange occurrences happening with her piano. The teacher claimed that the piano was possessed by a malevolent spirit that would play eerie melodies in the middle of the night. Some students even reported seeing the piano keys moving by themselves when no one was around. The piano had been a part of the school's music department for years, and the teacher had always thought that it was just a little temperamental. But one night, when she was working late, she heard a strange noise coming from the piano. At first, she dismissed it as just the sound of the old instrument settling, but then the keys started to move on their own. Over time, the teacher noticed that the strange occurrences happened more frequently, especially at night when the school was empty. She began to feel as though someone or something was watching her every time she sat down to play the piano. And the music that the piano produced during these occurrences was always different, a haunting melody that seemed to have a life of its own. The teacher had tried to get rid of the piano, but no one seemed interested in buying it. And so, she continued to play on it, even though it gave her the creeps. But she was not alone in her experiences, as more and more students began to report strange happenings around the piano. The school's music department became known as the place where the haunted piano resided, and students would often gather around it to try and catch a glimpse of the ghostly presence that haunted it. But as the years went by, the piano became less and less used, until eventually, it was removed from the music department entirely. But even though the haunted piano is gone, the legend lives on. Some say that if you listen closely on quiet nights, you can still hear the eerie melody of the piano floating through the school's halls, a reminder of the haunting that once occurred. Number 1. The Haunted Library. The school's library was a popular place for students to study, read, and relax between classes. But according to legend, the library was built on top of an old cemetery, and the spirits of the dead still lingered in the building. Some students reported seeing ghostly apparitions wandering between the stacks of books, dressed in old-fashioned clothing and looking lost and confused. Others claimed to have heard ghostly whispers and the sound of pages turning when the library was empty. One student even claimed to have been locked in the library overnight and to have experienced a terrifying encounter with a ghostly presence that seemed to follow them around the room. The student described feeling as though they were being watched, and hearing strange noises coming from the shadows. Despite the eerie reputation of the library, many students continued to use it as a quiet place to study and read. But as the stories of ghostly encounters continued to spread, more and more people became convinced that there was something otherworldly about the building. The school administration denied the rumors, claiming that there was no evidence of any haunting or paranormal activity in the library. But the stories persisted, and the library became known as the school's most haunted building, a place where the dead refused to rest in peace. Today, the library still stands, a silent reminder of the haunting that once occurred. Some students avoid it at all costs, while others brave the eerie atmosphere in search of a quiet place to study. But no matter what anyone thinks of the library, its reputation as a haunted and ghostly place remains firmly intact.